And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome. Welcome to Thurber night. It is Sunday night. I am home. The great Betty Sue is on the road. She is driving. Ladies and gentlemen, take a moment. Take a moment and wish good traffic upon our beloved Betty Sue somewhere in Mississippi or Alabama on her way to Chattanooga, Tennessee tonight. Chattanooga, Tennessee. She'll be driving from there tomorrow up to the Northeast just in time for the snowstorm. Just in time for the snowstorm, ladies and gentlemen, in order to join James McMurtry and then Chris Smither and then James McMurtry again on tour throughout all the finer cities of the Northeast. So wish her well, ladies and gentlemen. Send her good vibes as she drives on through the night. We have a problem here at Hadley Street, ladies and gentlemen. We have a problem that I need to talk to you about. It involves my cat Charbonneau, or Betty Sue and my cat Charbonneau. Charbonneau, as you know, has been a wonderful cat. Cheerful, good-natured, gregarious, but unfortunately, he has fallen into bad company. Bad company, ladies and gentlemen. When I am away, a viper in our midst has taken care of the cat. This viper in our midst, ladies and gentlemen, Aunt Charlene, as she is known. Aunt Charlene has introduced our dear innocent Charbonneau to the evils of catnip. Yes, there is trouble here in River City. Ladies and gentlemen, there is trouble here on Hadley Street. There is trouble that starts with C. No, trouble that starts with T and rhymes with C, and that stands for catnip. Aunt Charlene, as she is known, first started bringing catnip into the house just as a special treat. Just as a special treat, ladies and gentlemen. Now that Charbonneau is hooked on it, she is bringing in all natural catnip leaf and flower, ladies and gentlemen. All natural cat. Look at it. Look at it. It does not look like catnip. You know darn well what it is, ladies and gentlemen. Look at what she brought in today. She said her cats are going crazy for this. Her cats are going crazy for this. Look at it. Look at it. It has a price tag of $2.49. Catnip buds, 0.2 ounces from the field. From the field. And our cat, ladies and gentlemen, our cat is staying out till all hours with his fellow addict Breeze from across the street. Breeze and their little friend Zoe. The posse, the pussy posse sits. They sit over there on the Milliken's front yard. I see the deals going down, ladies and gentlemen. I see the deals going down. And I do not know what to do. I do not know what to do about our dear Charbonneau. Tonight, in order to lure him back in, because he's been staying out till all hours. He's been staying out till all hours. In order to lure him back in, I took a pinch of that there from the field catnip, and I put it on the porch. And he came running up, ladies and gentlemen. He came running up onto the porch and stuck his snout right into that dish of catnip. And while his snout was down, I grabbed him around the collar and I hurled him into this living room. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, he is upstairs sulking. He wants to be over there with Breeze and Zoe. Yes, there is trouble here on Hadley Street. Trouble that starts with T, rhymes with C, which stands for catnip. That said, it is now time For Thurber night, we have tonight, our liberal snowplowing beneficiary is just the Bellows Falls Historical Society. They do very good work, ladies and gentlemen. They do very good work preserving our past. And I thank those who donated. And those of you who do donate, if you have a particular charity that you would like us to have be the liberal snowplowing do-gooder beneficiary, just drop me a note. Because I want to thank you guys for week after week supporting the liberal snowplows. Now, the one caveat is they have to show up when you type in the name in Facebook. So they're registered with Network for Good. I'm not quite sure how it all works, but I tried looking for a donkey rescue place this morning, and I could not get a donkey rescue place to show up on the Network for Good approved list. So if you have a charity that is approved by Network for Good, as opposed to Network for Evil or Network Part-Time or something, if you have a charity approved by Network for Good, let me know and we'll have it be a beneficiary. But only if you give all the time, because otherwise, no. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have to thank tonight a few wonderful people who always think about the liberal snowplowing do-gooders. First off, of course, out there in St. Louis, Missouri, the great Terry Hudson. Our friend, the painter par excellence, Catherine Fisher, over there in Saxon's River. The bridge playing shark, that's right, Ms. Martha Rowley, down there in Bonneville, Massachusetts, where his wife Aileen is aware that she can outrun him right now in case the bears come a-calling. Mr. Gary Pierce, out there in Omaha, Nebraska, the peripatetic John Wilhelm, down there in Guilford, Massachusetts, where there are more crazy people per capita than should be allowed, ladies and gentlemen. The great Sarah Ovenden. Have someone, I don't know who it is. I have someone, I don't know who it is. But they gave, ladies and gentlemen, they gave, but it's not a naughty moose. It is not a mouse. Not a mouse. Thank you, not a mouse. And out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where the viaducts grow as high as can be imagined. Not quite as high as my cat. Not quite as high as my cat. Not quite as tall as my very, very, very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter, and his wonderful wife, Elise. Thank you all so much. Tonight's reading, so long as I don't choke, not figuratively, literally, is James Thurber's More Alarms at Night. This is Betty Sue's favorite chapter, so she may not be able to join us tonight, but maybe she can watch it again, once she finally gets to her hotel. All right, More Alarms at Night. One of the incidents that I always think of first when I cast back over my youth is what happened the night that my father threatened to get Buck. This, as you will see, is not precisely a fair or accurate description of what actually occurred, but it is the way in which I and the other members of my family invariably allude to the occasion. We were living at the time in an old house at 77 Lexington Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. In the early years of the 19th century, Columbus won out as state capital by only one vote over Lancaster. And ever since then, it has had this hallucination that it is being followed, a curious municipal state of mind which affects in some way or other all those who live there. Columbus is a town in which almost anything is likely to happen and in which almost everything has. My father was sleeping in the front room on the second floor, next to that of my brother Roy, who was then about 16. Father was usually in bed by 9:30 and up again by 10:30 to protest bitterly against the Victrola record we three boys were in the habit of playing over and over, namely, No News or What Killed the Dog, a recitation by Nat Wills. The record had been played so many times that its grooves were deeply cut, and the needle often kept revolving in the same groove, repeating over and over the same words, such as, ate some burnt hoss flesh, ate some burnt hoss flesh, ate some burnt hoss flesh. It was this recitation that generally got Father out of bed. On the night in question, however, we had all gone to bed at about the same time, without much fuss. Roy, as a matter of fact, had been in bed all day with a kind of mild fever. It wasn't severe enough to cause delirium, and my brother was the last person in the world to give way to delirium. Nevertheless, he had warned Father when Father went to bed that he might become delirious. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Roy, who was wakeful, decided to pretend that delirium was on him in order to have, as he later explained it, some fun. He got out of bed and going into my father's room, shook him and said, "Buck, your time has come." My father's name was not Buck, but Charles, nor had he ever been called Buck. He was a tall, mildly nervous, peaceable gentleman, given to quiet pleasures and eager that everything should run smoothly. He said, with drowsy bewilderment. "Get up, Buck," said my brother, coldly, but with a certain gleam in his eye. My father leapt out of bed on the side away from his son, rushed from the room, locked the door behind him, and shouted us all up. We were naturally enough reluctant to believe that Roy, who was quiet and self-contained, had threatened his father with any such abracadabra as Father had said he had. My older brother, Herman, went back to bed without any comment. "You've had a bad dream," my mother said. This vexed my father. "I tell you, he called me Buck, and he told me my time had come," he said. We went to the door of his room, unlocked it, and tiptoed through it to Roy's room. He lay in his bed, breathing easily as if he was fast asleep. It was apparent at a glance that he did not have a high fever. My mother gave Father a look. "I tell you, he did," whispered Father. Our presence in the room finally seemed to awaken Roy, and he was, or rather, as we found out later, pretended to be, astonished and bewildered. "What's the matter?" he asked. "Nothing," said my mother. "Just your father had a nightmare." "I did not have a nightmare," said Father, slowly and firmly. He wore an old-fashioned side-slit nightgown, which looked rather odd on his tall, spare figure. The situation, before we let it drop and everybody went to bed again, became, as such situations in our family usually did, rather more complicated than ironed out. Roy demanded to know what had happened, what Father had said, and Roy demanded to know what had happened, and my mother told him in considerably garbled fashion what Father had told her. At this, a light dawned in Roy's eyes. "Oh, Dad's got it backwards," he said. He then explained that he had heard his father get out of bed and had called to him. "I'll handle this," my father had answered. "Buck is downstairs." "Who is this Buck?" my mother demanded. "I don't know any Buck, and I never said that," father contended irritably. None of us, except Roy, of course, believed him. "You had a dream," mother said. "People have these dreams." "I did not have a dream," father said. And he stood in front of it. He was pretty well nettled by this time. And he stood in front of a bureau mirror, brushing his hair with a pair of military brushes. It always seemed to calm father to brush his hair. My mother declared that it was a sin and a shame for a grown man to wake up a sick boy simply because he, the grown man, father, had got on his back and had a bad dream. My father, as a matter of fact, had been known to have nightmares, usually about Lillian Russell and President Grover Cleveland, who chased him. We argued the thing for perhaps another half hour, after which mother made their father sleep in her room. "You're all safe now, boys," she said firmly as she shut the door. I could hear father grumbling for a long time, with an occasional monosyllable of doubt from mother. It was some 6 months after that father went through a similar experience with me. He was at that time sleeping in the room next to mine. I'd been trying all afternoon in vain to think of the name Perth Amboy. It seems now like a very simple name to recall. And yet, on the day in question, I thought of every other town in the country, as well as such words and names and phrases as terracotta, walla walla, bill of lading, vice versa, hoity toity, Pall Mall, Bodley Head, Showman Hike, etc., without ever coming close to Perth Amboy. I suppose terracotta was the closest I came, though that is not very close. Long after I'd gone to bed, I was struggling with the problem. I began to indulge in the wildest fancies as I lay there in the dark, such as that there was no such town, and even that there was no such state as New Jersey. I fell to repeating the word Jersey over and over again until it became idiotic and meaningless. If you have ever lain awake at night and repeated one word over and over thousands and millions and hundreds of thousands of millions of times, you know the disturbing mental state you can get into. I got to thinking there was nobody else in the world but me, and various other wild imaginings of that nature. Eventually, lying there thinking these outlandish thoughts, I grew slightly alarmed. I began to suspect that one might lose one's mind over some such trivial mental tick as a futile search for terra firma, piggly wiggly, gorgonzola, Prester John, Arc de Triomphe, Holy Moses, Lares and Lares and Penates. I began to feel the imperative necessity of human contact. This silly and alarming tangle of thought and fancy had gone on long enough. I might get into some kind of mental aberrancy unless I found out the name of that New Jersey town and could go to sleep. Therefore, I got out of bed, walked into the room where father was sleeping, and I shook him. "Ah," he mumbled. I shook him more fiercely, and he finally woke up with a glaze of dream and apprehension in his eye. "What's the matter?" he asked thickly. I must indeed have been rather wild of eye, and my hair, which is unruly, becomes monstrously tousled and snarled at night. "What is it?" said father, sitting up, in readiness to spring out of bed on the far side. The thought must have been going through his mind that all his sons were crazy or on the verge of going crazy. I see that now, but I didn't then, for I had forgotten the Buck incident, and I did not realize how similar my appearance must have been to Roy's the night he called Father Buck and told him that his time had come. Listen, I said, name some towns in New Jersey, quick. It must have been around 3 a.m. Father got up, keeping the bed between him and me, and started to pull on his trousers. Don't bother about dressing, I said. Just name some towns in New Jersey. Well, he hastily pulled on his clothes. I remember he left his socks off and put his shoes on his bare feet. Father began to name, in a shaky voice, various New Jersey cities. I can still see him reaching for his coat without taking his eyes off of me. Newark, he said. Jersey City, Atlantic City, Elizabeth, Patterson, Passaic, Trenton, Jersey City, Trenton, Patterson. It has 2 names, I snapped. Elizabeth and Patterson, he said. No, I told him irritably. This is one town with one name, but there are 2 words in it, like helter skelter. Helter skelter, said my father, moving slowly toward the bedroom door and smiling in a faint, strained way, which I understand now, but didn't then, was meant to humor me. When he was within a few paces of the door, he fairly leapt for it and ran out into the hall, his coattails and shoelaces flying. The exit stunned me. I had no notion that he thought I had gone out of my senses. I could only believe that he had gone out of his, or that, only partially awake, he was engaged in some form of running in his sleep. I ran after him, and I caught him at the door of Mother's room, and I grabbed him in order to reason with him. I shook him a little, thinking to wake him completely. Mary, Roy, Herman, he shouted. I too began to shout for my brothers and my mother. My mother opened her door instantly, and there we were at 3:30 in the morning, grappling and shouting, Father, partly dressed, but without socks or shirt, and I in pajamas. Now what? Demanded my mother, grimly pulling us apart. She was capable, fortunately, of handling any 2 of us, and she never in her life was alarmed by the words or actions of any one of us. Look out for Jamie, said Father. He always called me Jamie when he was excited. My mother looked at me. What's the matter with your father? She asked. I said, I didn't. I said, I didn't know. I said he'd gotten up suddenly, dressed, and run out of the room. Where did you think you were going? Mother asked him coolly. He looked at me. We looked at each other, breathing hard, but somewhat calmer. He was babbling about New Jersey at this infernal hour of the night, said Father. He came to my room and asked me to name towns in New Jersey. I just asked him, I said. I was trying to think of one and I couldn't sleep. You see, said Father triumphantly. Mother did not look at him. Get to bed, both of you, she said. I don't want to hear any more out of you tonight, dressing and tearing up and down the hall at this hour of the morning. She went back into the room and shut her door. Father and I went back to bed. Are you all right? He called to me. Are you? I asked. Well, good night, he said. Good night, I said. Mother would not let the rest of us discuss the affair next morning at breakfast. Herman asked what the hell had been the matter. We will go on to something more elevating, said my mother. All right, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we'll see you next week. We'll see you next week for, now I skipped this one. The next chapter, ladies and gentlemen, I think should be retired. It's classist. It's a bit racist. It was funny in 1920, but it's 100 years later now, or 1933 or whenever this came out. But it's close on 100 years later and things change. So the next chapter we're going to have, ladies and gentlemen, is The Dog That Bit People, about Muggs. Muggs the Airedale. All right, you take good care. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.